My name is Aurora Reynolds. I am 28 years old and I live in Idaho. The cold air of Idaho felt nothing like the freezing spray of the Bering Sea. I stood on the front porch of my own house, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. I still felt the motion of the waves in my legs. I had spent the last 6 months as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer, pulling drowning people out of 50-foot swells in the pitch black. I was exhausted. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. I opened the door. The heat hit my face. Christmas music was blasting. My house was full of people. My sister, Ivy, was in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne. She looked expensive. She always did. My father spotted me first. He didn't come over to hug me. He didn't ask if I was safe. He just raised his glass in a toast. The room went quiet. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said, his voice loud and cheerful. "You're officially homeless now." Ivy giggled. They looked so proud. They thought they had sold my house behind my back to pay off Ivy's debts while I was away. They expected me to cry. They expected me to scream. Instead, I felt a cold, razor-thin smile spread across my face. They had no idea what I had discovered before I got on that plane. They didn't know I came home for a war. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Aurora Reynolds. I am 28 years old. To understand why my father's words at the party cut me so deep, you have to understand the years before. You have to understand who I was to them. I wasn't a daughter. I was a bank account. I am a rescue swimmer. My job is to jump out of helicopters into freezing oceans to save people who are about to die. It is loud, dangerous, and exhausting. Every time I jump, I know the ocean could kill me. I spent years training my body to be strong. I learned to hold my breath. I learned to ignore pain. But the hardest pain to ignore wasn't the cold water. It was my phone's screen. I remember a specific night about 2 years ago. I was stationed in Oregon then. I had just come back from a 12-hour shift. My muscles burned. My skin smelled like jet fuel and salt. I sat on my narrow bunk and picked up my phone. My father was FaceTime calling me. I answered, hoping he would ask about my day. I wanted to tell him about the fishermen we pulled out of the water. I wanted him to be proud. "Hey, Dad," I said. I rubbed my eyes. "It's been a long day." "Hi, Aurora," he said. He didn't ask about the day. He looked stressed. He was sitting in his kitchen, the one I paid to renovate the year before. "Listen, honey, we have a little situation." My stomach tightened. It was always a situation. "What is it?" I asked. "It's Ivy," he said. "She's having a hard time. Her car broke down and she can't get to her auditions. She needs a new transmission. It's expensive, Aurora." Ivy is my older sister. She is 30 years old. She has never held a job for more than 6 months. She calls herself an influencer or an actress, but mostly she just spends money. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just sent you $2,000 last month for her rent. Why doesn't she have any savings?" "You know how it is," Dad said. He waved his hand dismissively. "The industry is tough. She's building her brand, Aurora. You wouldn't understand. You have a steady paycheck. You're lucky." Lucky. He called me lucky. He didn't see the hours I spent in the gym. He didn't see the terror of night jumps. He didn't see the lonely holidays I spent on base because I couldn't afford to fly home. I couldn't afford it because I was sending my money to them. "How much?" I asked. I was too tired to fight. $1,500, he said quickly. I closed my eyes. That was my savings for a new laptop. "Okay, I'll transfer it." "You're a good girl," he said. He smiled, and for a second I felt that warm feeling I craved. He loved me. He needed me. "I'll tell Ivy. She'll be so grateful." She wasn't grateful. 3 days later, I saw Ivy's post on Instagram. She wasn't at a mechanic shop. She was in Las Vegas. In the photo, she was wearing a sparkly dress. She was holding a giant cocktail. But the thing that made my blood run cold was the bag on her shoulder. It was a designer handbag. I looked it up online. It cost $1,800. She didn't fix her car. She bought a purse. I called my dad. My hands were shaking. "Dad, I saw Ivy's pictures," I said. "She's in Vegas. She bought a bag. You said she needed a transmission." "Oh, Aurora, stop it," Dad snapped. His tone changed instantly. He wasn't the nice, needy father anymore. He was annoyed. "She was depressed. She needed a pick-me-up. The car can wait. Why are you always counting pennies? You make good money." "I risk my life for that money," I said. My voice cracked. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "We are a family. We help each other. Ivy is sensitive. She needs support. You are strong. You can handle it." That was the narrative. Aurora is strong. Ivy is fragile. Aurora is the workhorse. Ivy is the show pony. I stayed quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't demand the money back. I was trained to endure storms. I was trained to keep my head down and do the job. I thought if I just gave enough, if I just saved them enough times, eventually they would love me for me, not for my wallet. So I kept sending checks. I paid for the new roof on Dad's house. I paid for Ivy's acting classes. I paid for their groceries when Dad forgot his wallet. And then I bought my own house. It was a small house near the lake in Idaho. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. I put every cent of my bonus money into the down payment. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I didn't have to be a savior. I furnished it slowly. I painted the walls a calm blue. I locked the door and felt safe. Before I deployed to the Bering Sea for 6 months, I sat my father down at my kitchen table. "Dad," I said, "I'm leaving the keys with you. Just check on the pipes. Make sure the heat stays on. Don't let anyone live here." "Of course, honey," he said. He hugged me. "It's safe with me. Go save lives. We'll be here waiting." I trusted him. He was my dad. Even after the lies, even after the money, I thought there was a line he wouldn't cross. I thought my home was sacred. I was wrong. The silence I kept for years, the sacrifices I made, they didn't buy me love. They just taught my family that I was a resource to be harvested. They learned that I would never fight back. They were about to learn that everyone has a breaking point. The Bering Sea is a lonely place. For months, my world was just gray water, gray sky, and the orange of our rescue suits. We worked hard. When we weren't flying missions, we were maintaining gear or sleeping. There wasn't much time for personal life. The internet connection on the cutter was slow and spotty, but about 2 weeks before I was scheduled to come home, we had a lull. The storms settled down. We had some downtime. I was sitting in the mess hall with a cup of stale coffee. I had my phone connected to the ship's Wi-Fi. It was slow, but it was working. I don't know why I did it. It was just a habit. When you are far away from home, you look for pieces of it. I opened the Zillow app. I liked to look at my neighborhood. I liked to see the estimate of my house value go up. It made me feel like I was building a future. I typed in my address. My heart stopped. Usually the app just shows a map and an estimate, but this time it was different. There was a banner across the top of the photo. A red banner, pending sale. I blinked. I thought maybe the app was glitching. I refreshed the page. The banner stayed. Pending sale. I clicked on the listing. My hands started to sweat. There were photos, new photos. I scrolled through them, and I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. These weren't the old photos from when I bought the house. These were new. There was my living room, but my furniture was moved. My favorite blue armchair was pushed into the corner. There was a vase of flowers on the coffee table. I didn't own that vase. There was my kitchen. The counters were cleared off. My coffee maker was gone. There was my bedroom. My bed was made with linens I had never seen before. Someone had been in my house. Someone had staged it. Someone had listed it, and someone had sold it. I looked at the listing agent's name. Chase Manning. I knew him. He was a local realtor my dad played poker with. I looked at the price. It was listed for $50,000 less than it was worth. They were selling it cheap for a quick sale. I felt bile rise in my throat. I ran out of the mess hall and found a quiet corner on the deck. The freezing wind hit my face, but I was burning up. I called my father. It went straight to voicemail. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "Call me back now." I called Ivy. She didn't answer. I sent her a text. "Why is my house on Zillow?" Nothing. No bubbles indicating she was typing, just silence. I sat there on the cold steel deck, staring at the gray ocean. I tried to make sense of it. How was this possible? I owned the deed. My name was on the title. How could they sell a house that didn't belong to them? Then I remembered the power of attorney. Before I deployed, I signed a limited power of attorney document giving my father the right to handle my finances in case of emergency. It was standard procedure for military personnel. It was meant to be used if I was in a coma, or if a bill needed to be paid and I couldn't access my bank. It was a tool for protection. He had turned it into a weapon. I looked at the Zillow listing again. The status said pending under contract. That meant they had a buyer. That meant papers were signed. That meant the closing date was coming. I checked the date on the listing. It had gone up 3 weeks ago. For 3 weeks, while I was pulling dead bodies out of the water, my father and sister were walking strangers through my bedroom. They were negotiating the price of my life. I felt a tear freeze on my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I wasn't just sad, I was furious. I felt a shift inside me. It was like the tide turning. For years, I had been the good daughter. I had been the quiet one. I had accepted the crumbs of affection they threw at me. But this wasn't just favoritism. This was theft. This was a crime. I looked at the phone again. Ivy still hadn't replied. I realized then that they didn't care about me. They didn't care if I had a home to come back to. They probably thought I would just roll over. They probably thought, Aurora is nice, she'll forgive us. She has a steady job, she can buy another house. They were wrong. The Aurora who left 6 months ago was a daughter. The Aurora coming home was a soldier. I stood up. I walked back into the ship. I didn't go to my bunk to cry. I went to the ship's office to find a printer. I had work to do, I needed help. I couldn't fight this alone from the middle of the ocean. I thought of Princess Lewis. We had gone to Coast Guard boot camp together. She was tough, smart, and terrifyingly organized. After her service, she used her GI Bill to go to law school. Now she was a JAG attorney, a military lawyer. I sent her a message on Facebook. Princess, I need you. Emergency. Legal issue with family. Please call. She called me via an encrypted audio app 10 minutes later. Rory, she said. Her voice was sharp and clear. I'm here. What's happening? Are you okay? I'm alive, I said, but my father is selling my house. I told her everything. The Zillow listing. The power of attorney. The silence from my family. Okay, Princess said. I could hear her typing furiously on a keyboard in the background. Give me your social security number and your address. I'm going to pull the county records. Stay on the line. I waited. The silence stretched for 2 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engine and the clicking of Princess's keys. Oh, Rory, she whispered. This is bad. This is really bad. Tell me, I said. I braced myself. Okay, listen to me, she said. It's not just the sale, there's a lien. A what? A home equity line of credit. A HELOC, Princess explained. It was opened 4 months ago, in your name. I didn't open a line of credit, I said. Your father did, she said. He used the power of attorney, he signed for it. He took out $140,000 against the equity of your house. I felt dizzy. He took a loan on my house. Where is the money? I can see the transfer records because it's a public deed recording linked to the bank, she said. The funds were deposited into a joint account. Looks like it's shared by your father and Ivy Reynolds. Ivy, I breathed. And then, Princess continued, her voice getting colder, the money was moved out. Large chunks. Payments to credit card companies, payments to a luxury car dealership, and a massive transfer to Stardust LLC. That's Ivy's brand, I said. She started a company for her influencer career. So, Princess said, he mortgaged your house to pay off Ivy's debts and fund her business. Now, he's selling the house to pay off the loan he took out. He's selling it so he doesn't get caught, I realized. If he sells the house, the loan gets paid off at closing, and I'm just left with no house and no money. Exactly, Princess said. And here is the kicker, Rory, the buyer. It's listed as an LLC, but the registered agent is Allura Vance. Allura, I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. That's Ivy's best friend. Her husband is Rhett. He's a flipper. They flip houses. So it's an inside job, Princess summarized. Your dad gives the house to Ivy's friends at a discount. They probably promise to give Ivy a kickback. Your dad pays off the illegal loan. You come home homeless, and they tell you it was market forces or some lie. Can they do this? I asked. Is it legal? Technically, the power of attorney gives him the ability to sign, Princess said. But he has a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Stealing your equity to buy his other daughter, a Mercedes, is not in your best interest. It's fraud, it's breach of fiduciary duty, it's theft. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavy and solid. What do I do? I asked. The sale is pending, Princess said. It hasn't closed yet. The closing date is listed for December 26th. The day after Christmas, I said. You have time, she said. But you need evidence. I am going to email you every document I found. The deed of trust, the loan documents, the transfer records. I need you to print everything, make a file, a physical file. I will, I said. And Rory, Princess added, do not tell them you know. If they know you know, they might try to rush the closing. Or they might hide the money. Let them think you are clueless. Let them think you are the sweet, dumb daughter. I can do that, I said. Document everything, she commanded. Every text, every voicemail. If you talk to them, record it if your state allows one-party consent. Idaho is a one-party consent state, I said automatically. I knew the laws. Good girl, Princess said. Go get them, Rory, burn it down. I hung up. My email pinged. It was from Princess. Subject, evidence. I opened the attachment. It was 40 pages long. I stared at the numbers. My life, my hard work, my blood and sweat, all reduced to numbers on a page that my father stole to make Ivy look rich. I walked to the printer. I loaded a fresh ream of paper. I watched the pages slide out, one by one. Each page was a nail in their coffin. I didn't wait for the cutter to return to port. I requested emergency leave. I went to my commander. I stood tall in his office. "Sir," I said, "I have a family emergency. I need to go home immediately." He looked at my face. He saw the look in my eyes. He didn't ask for details. He just signed the paper. "Go, we'll get you on the next supply flight to Anchorage." The journey home was a blur of airports and anger. I flew from the cutter to Anchorage. Then Anchorage to Seattle. Then Seattle to Boise. Finally, a small jumper flight to my hometown. 21 hours of travel. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was racing. At the Anchorage airport, during a 4-hour layover, I went to the business center. I bought a thick black binder. I bought plastic sheet protectors. I bought a 3-hole punch. I sat at a desk in the corner, surrounded by businessmen in suits. I laid out my documents. I organized them chronologically. Tab 1, the original deed. My name, only my name. Tab 2, the power of attorney, the specific clause that said to be used only for the benefit of the principal. Tab 3, the HELOC loan, the signature that looked like mine but wasn't. The date, August 14th, 2 weeks after I left. Tab 4, the bank statements, the money entering the account, the money leaving. $4,000 to Lux Auto, $12,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue, $25,000 to Stardust LLC. Tab 5, the real estate contract, the lowball price, the buyer's name, Allura Vance. It was a story of betrayal told in paper. It was undeniable, it was cold, it was perfect. I snapped the binder rings shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I boarded the plane to Seattle. I held the binder against my chest like a shield. During the flight, I rehearsed what I would say. I imagined their faces. I imagined Ivy's fake smile. I imagined my father's booming voice. I used to be afraid of my father's voice. When he yelled, I would shrink. I would apologize even if I did nothing wrong. I just wanted peace. But I wasn't afraid anymore. You can't be afraid of a loud man when you have faced 50-foot waves. You can't be intimidated by a sister's tantrums when you have held a dying man in your arms. They were small. They were petty. And they were about to lose. I landed in Idaho. It was Christmas Eve. The airport was full of families hugging. People were wearing Santa hats. Children were crying. I walked past them alone. I went to the rental car counter. "I need a car," I told the clerk. "Something reliable." I got a silver sedan. I threw my duffel bag in the back seat. The binder went in the passenger seat right next to me. I drove out of the airport and onto the highway. The snow was falling heavily. The roads were slick. I drove carefully. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. "Hey honey. When do you land? We are all at the house waiting for you. It's a party." He lied so easily. At the house. He meant my house, the house he sold. I didn't reply. I drove through the familiar streets of my town. It looked the same. The Christmas lights were up on the lampposts. The diner was closed for the holiday. I turned onto my street. I saw my house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was lit up like a carnival. Every light was on. There were cars parked all over the driveway and on the lawn. My lawn. I saw Ivy's bright pink Jeep. I saw Dad's truck. I saw a Range Rover that I knew belonged to Allura and Rhett. They were partying. They were celebrating the sale. They were drinking champagne bought with my equity. I parked the rental car across the street. I turned off the engine. I took a deep breath. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were dark. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I wasn't the pretty girl they wanted. I was the rescue swimmer. "Showtime," I whispered to myself. I grabbed the black binder. I stepped out into the snow. The cold air bit my skin, but I didn't feel it. I walked up the driveway. I could hear the music. It was Mariah Carey. I reached the front door. I didn't knock. It was my house. I had a key. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. I stepped inside, bringing the winter chill with me. I stepped into the hallway. The heat of the house was suffocating. It smelled like expensive perfume, pine needles, and stale beer. For a moment, nobody noticed me. The music was loud, a pop cover of Santa Baby. People were laughing in the kitchen. I saw faces I recognized. There were neighbors I had grown up with. There were Ivy's friends from high school. There was the pastor from my dad's church. They were all drinking my wine. They were standing on my hardwood floors. I walked into the living room. Ivy was the first to see me. She was standing by the fireplace, wearing a white cashmere sweater and a silver sequin skirt. She looked like an angel. She looked like she had never worked a day in her life. Her eyes went wide. She tapped Dad on the shoulder. Dad turned around. He was holding a glass of champagne. His face was flushed red, probably from the alcohol. When he saw me, he didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed, like I had arrived at the wrong time. But then he plastered a big, fake smile on his face. He raised his hands in the air. "Aurora," he boomed. The music seemed to lower as people turned to look. "Look who it is, the hero returns." He walked over to me. He tried to hug me. I didn't move. I stood stiff as a board, my arms at my sides. He smelled like scotch and mints. "We were just talking about you," he said, pulling back. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked over my shoulder, addressing the room. "Everyone, my daughter is home from the sea." There was a smattering of applause. It felt fake. Then Dad leaned in close to me. His voice dropped. "Why do you look like that? You look like a ghost. Go upstairs and change. Put on a dress. You're embarrassing your sister." "I'm not going upstairs," I said. My voice was low and steady. "And I'm not changing." Dad laughed nervously. He turned back to the room. He spotted Allura and Rhett standing near the Christmas tree. Rhett was holding a signed contract in his hand like a trophy. Dad grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. He pulled me toward the center of the room. "Well, since you're here," Dad announced, his voice booming again. "We have some big news, a little Christmas surprise." I knew what was coming. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs, but my face remained stone cold. "Aurora," Dad said, smiling that shark-like smile. "We know how hard you work. We know how much of a burden this house has been for you. The maintenance, the taxes, it's too much for a single girl who is never home." He paused for dramatic effect. Ivy was beaming. She looked at Allura and squealed. "So," Dad continued, "we took care of it for you. We sold the place. To our dear friends, Allura and Rhett." The room cheered. Rhett raised the contract in the air. Dad looked at me, expecting gratitude. "Welcome home, sweetheart. You're officially homeless now. But don't worry, we got a great price, and you can stay in the guest room at my place until you find a rental." The room went silent, waiting for my reaction. They expected me to cry. They expected me to say thank you. I looked at Dad, then I looked at Ivy, then I looked at the buyers, Allura and Rhett. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. "You sold my house," I repeated flatly. "We did," Ivy chimed in. She walked over and draped her arm around Dad. "It's for the best, Rory. You're never here anyway, and Allura really needs a place to raise her baby. It's a win-win." "And the money?" I asked. "Where is the money from the sale going?" Dad's smile faltered for a second. "Well, into the family trust, of course, for safekeeping. We'll manage it for you." "The family trust," I said. "You mean the joint account you share with Ivy?" Dad's eyes narrowed. "Now, Aurora, don't start this, not in front of guests." "I think the guests should hear this," I said. My voice got louder. "I think Allura and Rhett should hear this." I lifted the black binder. I placed it on the coffee table with a heavy thud. "What is that?" Ivy asked, looking at the binder with disgust. "That," I said, "is a paper trail." I opened the binder. I turned to the first section. "Allura," I said, looking directly at the woman who thought she was buying my home. "Rhett, did you run a title search?" Rhett looked confused. "The title company is handling that. We close on the 26th. "You might want to see this," I said. I pulled out the page showing the home equity line of credit. "My father took out a loan for $140,000 against this house in August," I said clearly. "He used a power of attorney that was only valid for emergencies. He didn't use the money for an emergency. He used it to pay off Ivy's credit cards." I turned the page. I pointed to the bank transfer records. "See," I pointed. "August 15th, $12,000 to Visa. August 20th, $4,000 for a lease down payment on a Range Rover. August 25th, $25,000 to Stardust LLC. Ivy's face went pale. "That's private," she shrieked. "Dad, make her stop." Dad lunged for the binder. "That's enough, Aurora. You are drunk. You are tired." I stepped back, snatching the binder away. I was faster than him. I was stronger than him. I trained to fight currents that could crush a boat. He was just an old man who stole from his daughter. "I am not drunk," I said. "I am sober and I am furious." I turned to Rhett. He looked pale. "Rhett," I said, "my father is selling you this house to pay off that illegal loan before I found out about it. He is committing mortgage fraud. If you close on this house, you are buying stolen property. I will sue you. I will tie this title up in court for 10 years. You will never live here. Rhett dropped the contract. It fluttered to the floor. Is this true? Rhett asked, looking at my father. Jim, is there a lien on the house? It's a misunderstanding, Dad stammered. He was sweating now. I was going to pay it off with the proceeds. It's standard business. It's not business, I said. It's theft. I pulled out my phone. I showed them the screen. It was the text message from Princess, my JAG lawyer friend. I have already reported the fraudulent use of power of attorney to the bank, I lied. I hadn't done it yet, but they didn't know that. The account is frozen. The sale cannot close. You ungrateful brat, Dad hissed. His face twisted into a snarl. The mask of the loving father fell off completely. After everything I did for you, I raised you, this money is mine. Families share. Families share, I repeated. But you didn't ask to share. You stole my safety. You stole my future. You stole the roof over my head while I was risking my life to send you money. I looked at Ivy. She was crying now, but not because she was sorry. She was crying because she was scared. And you, I said to her, you are 30 years old, get a job. The room was dead silent. The party guests were frozen. Nobody was drinking. The music had stopped. Get out, Dad screamed. He pointed at the door. Get out of my house. It's not your house, I said calmly. It's mine. My name is on the deed. But don't worry. I'm leaving. I looked around the room at the decorations, the people, the mess. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I'm going to a hotel, I said. Rhett Allera. I suggest you meet me at the Lakeside Cafe tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. If you don't, I will name you as co-conspirators in the lawsuit I am filing on Tuesday. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned around and walked out. I heard Ivy screaming behind me. I heard Dad throwing a glass against the wall. It shattered. I walked out into the snow. The cold air felt clean. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I got into my rental car. I drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, but it was better than being in that house. I woke up at 7 a.m. I showered. I put on my Coast Guard sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. I pulled my hair back tight. I wanted to look like myself. I drank terrible coffee from the lobby and reviewed my binder. At 8:45 a.m., I drove to the Lakeside Cafe. It was a small diner near the water. It was quiet the day after Christmas. I took a booth in the back. I laid the black binder on the table. At 9 a.m. sharp, the door opened. Allera and Rhett walked in. They looked terrible. Allera's eyes were puffy, like she had been crying all night. Rhett looked gray and anxious. They weren't the confident, wealthy couple from the party anymore. They looked like people who realized they had stepped into a bear trap. They saw me and walked over. They sat down opposite me. They didn't order coffee. Aurora, Rhett started. His voice was shaky. Look, we didn't know, we swear. Your dad told us you wanted to sell. He said you were moving to Alaska permanently. He lied, I said simply. We put down a $10,000 earnest money deposit, Allera said, her voice trembling. He cashed the check yesterday. I nodded. I assumed he would. That's our savings, Allera said. Tears welled up in her eyes. Rhett flips houses, but the market has been slow. We needed this deal. If we lose that $10,000. You won't just lose the $10,000, I said. I opened the binder. If you try to close on this house, you will lose everything. I pushed the binder toward them. Read tab 5, I said. Rhett opened the binder. He read the highlighted text. It was a printout of the Idaho state statute regarding fraudulent inducement and conspiracy to commit fraud. My lawyer tells me that since you are close personal friends with Ivy, I said, a judge might believe you were in on the scam. You are buying a house for $50,000 under market value. That looks suspicious, Rhett. That looks like a kickback. Rhett went pale. We aren't, we just wanted a deal. I believe you, I said, but the court won't. Unless, I let the word hang in the air. Unless what? Rhett asked. He leaned in, he was desperate. Unless you help me, I said. How? Allera asked. You are victims too, I said. My father defrauded you. He took your deposit for a house he had no legal right to sell, because the power of attorney was invalid the moment he used it for his own benefit. He acted in bad faith. I pulled out a notepad. Here is what is going to happen, I said. My voice was calm, almost instructional. It was the voice I used when training rookies. You are not going to buy my house. The sale is cancelled. Rhett nodded vigorously. Done. We don't want it. But you want your $10,000 back, I said. Yes, Alara said. He doesn't have it, I said brutal truth. He spent it, or he moved it to hide it. You won't get it back by asking nicely. So what do we do? Rhett asked. You sue him, I said. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a list of lawyers Princess had sent me. These are real estate attorneys, I said. You are going to hire one of them today. You are going to file a civil suit against Jim Reynolds and Ivy Reynolds for fraud, breach of contract, and theft by deception. Rhett looked at the list. Sue your dad, Aurora. He's your dad. He stole from me, I said. And he stole from you. If you sue him, you create a record. You prove that you weren't part of the scam. You become the victims. I looked Rhett in the eye. I will testify for you, I said. I will bring this binder to court. I will stand up and say that my father lied to you, took your money, and tried to sell my property illegally. I will hand over the bank records proving he funneled the money to Ivy. Alara looked at Rhett. We have to do it, Rhett. We need that money back. Rhett took a deep breath. He looked at the binder, then at me. You really want to take him down? Rhett asked. This will ruin him, bankruptcy. Maybe even jail. I looked out the window at the frozen lake. I thought about the cold nights on the ship. I thought about the text asking for money for a transmission that became a handbag. I thought about the "you're homeless now" toast. It wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping him. If I didn't stop him, he would do it again. He would drain me dry until I had nothing left. He ruined himself, I said. I'm just turning on the lights. Rhett nodded. He picked up the list of lawyers. Okay, Rhett said. We'll call the lawyer. Call Chase Manning, the realtor, too, I added. Tell him the deal is off because of fraud. Tell him you are reporting him to the real estate board for listing a house without verifying the owner's intent. Chase will lose his license, Rhett said. Chase should have done his job, I said. I closed the binder. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't the helpless daughter anymore. I was the commander of the operation. Do it today, I said. Don't warn him. Just file. Rhett and Alara stood up. They looked shaken, but they also looked determined. They had a target now, and it wasn't me. I'm sorry, Aurora, Alara said quietly. We really didn't know. I know, I said. They walked out of the cafe. I watched them get into their Range Rover. I saw Rhett pick up his phone immediately. I sat there for a moment, alone in the booth. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but I didn't mind. I had just turned my father's allies into his enemies. I had just dismantled his plan with a single conversation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ivy. You ruined Christmas. I hate you. Dad is crying. I looked at the message. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I typed back, he isn't crying because he's sad. He's crying because he got caught. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's number. I paid for my coffee and walked out. I had one more stop to make. I had to go to the courthouse to file my own protection order. The war wasn't over, but the tide had officially turned. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like a building blowing up. It was more like a slow rot that finally caused the floor to give way. I didn't stay to watch it up close. I stayed in my motel room. I went to the base. I did my job, but I heard about it. In a small town, you hear everything. And because I had hired a lawyer, I saw the paperwork. It started with Rhett and Alara. They didn't waste time. They filed their lawsuit on December 28th. They sued for the return of their earnest money, plus damages for legal fees and emotional distress. They named my father, Ivy, and the realtor, Chase Manning. Because Rhett was well known in the local real estate community, the news traveled fast. The realtor Chase Manning was the first domino to fall. I wasn't there, but Princess told me what happened. She got the report from the state licensing board. Rhett had filed a formal complaint. He attached the text messages where Chase admitted he knew I wasn't in the country and had never spoken to me directly. Chase tried to say he was following the father's instructions. But the law is clear. A realtor has to verify the seller. Chase had ignored the red flags because he wanted the commission. 2 weeks into January, Chase's face disappeared from the bus stop benches around town. His for sale signs were pulled out of lawns. His license was suspended pending an investigation, and then, a month later, it was revoked. He lost his career because he thought my father was untouchable. Ivy's collapse was louder. It was public. My lawyer, Princess, was ruthless. She subpoenaed Ivy's bank records to prove where the money from the illegal loan went. We needed to prove unjust enrichment. The records became public record during the discovery phase of the lawsuit. Everyone saw it. They saw the $4,000 lease on the Range Rover. They saw the $12,000 credit card bill for wardrobe expenses. They saw the transfers to Stardust LLC that were immediately spent on spa treatments and trips to Cabo. Ivy had built her entire online persona on being a self-made success. She posted about hustle culture. She posted about being a boss babe. Now the truth was out. She wasn't a boss. She was a thief. She was stealing from her deployed sister to buy handbags. The comments section on her Instagram turned toxic overnight. People hate a liar. Did you really buy that bag with your sister's military pay? Fraud. Thief. Ivy tried to delete the comments. Then she turned off comments. Then, about 3 weeks after Christmas, she deleted her account entirely. Her brand deals, the free shampoos, the discount codes for leggings, vanished. No company wants to be associated with a woman being sued for fraud. She lost her car. The dealership repossessed the Range Rover because the payments stopped. My dad couldn't pay them anymore. Dad, my father's fall was the hardest to watch. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because he had always seemed so big to me. He was the patriarch. He was the one in charge. Now he was just a man drowning in debt he created. Rhett and Alara's lawsuit froze his assets. Then, the bank stepped in. When I alerted the bank to the fraudulent power of attorney, they launched an internal fraud investigation. They froze the home equity line of credit. They demanded immediate repayment of the $140,000 he had already spent. He didn't have it. He had spent it on Ivy. The bank moved to foreclose on his house, the house I grew up in, to recover their losses. They also seized his rental property, a small duplex he owned across town. He tried to call me. My phone showed the blocked calls in the log. 10 times a day, then 20, then 0. He realized I wasn't coming to save him. In February, I received a notification from the court. James Reynolds has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It was over. He lost his rental properties. He lost his truck, his big, shiny Ford F-150 that he loved more than he loved me. I saw it listed on an auction site. It looked small in the photo. He was forced to move into a small apartment on the bad side of town. Ivy had to move in with him because she had nowhere else to go. I imagined them there. 2 people who thought they were royalty, now living in a cramped 2-bedroom box, blaming everyone but themselves. I didn't gloat, I didn't drive by to laugh at them, I didn't post about it on Facebook. I just watched the legal updates come in. Judgment entered, assets seized, case closed. This wasn't revenge. I didn't do this to hurt them. I did it to stop them from hurting me. It was accountability. And for people who have never been held accountable, accountability feels like an attack. March came. The snow started to melt. The days got longer. The legal dust had settled. The sale to Rhett and Alara was officially dead. The lien on my house was complicated, but because we proved fraud, the bank had to go after my father's assets, not my house, to satisfy the debt. Princess was a miracle worker. She untangled the title. On a Tuesday morning I got the call. "The house is yours again, Rory," Princess said. "Clear title, no liens, you can move back in." I drove to the house. I stood in the driveway. It looked the same as it did before. The paint was the same. The windows were the same. I unlocked the door and walked inside. The house was cold. It smelled musty. I walked through the rooms. I saw the ghost of the Christmas party. I saw the spot on the rug where I had dropped the binder. I saw the wall where my father threw the glass. There was still a small dent in the drywall. I went to my bedroom. My bed was there. I sat down on the mattress. I waited to feel relief. I waited to feel that sense of home coming back. But I didn't feel it. This wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It had been violated. My father had walked through here calculating how much money he could get for my life. Ivy had walked through here touching my things, thinking she deserved them more than I did. The walls had eyes. The floorboards remembered the betrayal. I couldn't live here. If I stayed, I would always be the daughter who had to fight her family for the keys. I would always be looking over my shoulder. I stood up. I made a decision. I called a real estate agent, not Chase Manning, a different one. A woman named Sarah who had a reputation for being honest. "I want to sell it," I told her. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You just got it back." "I'm sure," I said. "I need a clean slate." We listed it. This time I listed it. I set the price. It sold in 4 days. The buyers were a young couple. The husband was in the Navy, stationed at the nearby training center. The wife was pregnant. They reminded me of myself, starting out, hopeful, looking for a place to build a life. When I handed them the keys at the closing table, the wife had tears in her eyes. "We love it so much," she said. "It feels like a happy home." I smiled. "It is," I said. "Make it your own." I walked away with a check, a big check. The market had gone up. I looked at the number. It was a lot of money, enough to buy a bigger house, enough to buy a fancy car. But that money felt heavy. It was money tied to the drama. I kept my original down payment amount, the money I had earned with my own sweat before the drama started. The rest, the profit, I wrote a check to the Coast Guard Foundation. It's a charity that helps the families of Coast Guard members who die in the line of duty. It helps pay for their children's college. It helps with emergency relief. I mailed the check. Then, I looked for an apartment. I found a place in the city, 40 minutes away from my old neighborhood. It was on the 4th floor of an old brick building. It had big windows that looked out over the lake. It was small. Just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room. But it was secure. You needed a key fob to get into the building. You needed a code to get into the elevator. I moved in on a rainy Saturday. I didn't bring much. I bought a new couch, a gray one, not blue. I bought new plates. I sat on my balcony watching the rain hit the lake. I had one last piece of business. I went to the courthouse one last time. I stood before a judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I am requesting a permanent order of protection against James Reynolds and Ivy Reynolds." I submitted the police reports. I submitted the fraud evidence. I submitted the transcripts of the voicemails my father had left me when he was drunk, screaming that I was a traitor, that I owed him everything. The judge looked at the file. He looked at me. He saw a woman who was done being a victim. "Granted," he said. 5 years, no contact. If they come within 500 feet of you, they go to jail." I walked out of the courthouse. I felt lighter. My steps were faster. I drove to my new apartment. I parked in my spot. I went up the elevator. I locked my door. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was safe. The silence in the apartment wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Christmas came again. It had been exactly 1 year since the welcome home party. 1 year since my father told me I was homeless. The Idaho winter was brutal that year. The snow was piled 3 feet high on my balcony. The wind howled outside the glass. But inside my apartment, it was warm. I didn't have a big tree. I had a small, artificial tree sitting on a side table. It didn't have expensive glass ornaments. It had a few simple lights and a star I had made myself out of scrap titanium wire from the base workshop. The apartment smelled like garlic, searing meat, and laughter. I wasn't alone. Princess was there. She had flown in from DC. She was wearing a silly sweater with a reindeer on it. She was chopping vegetables at my tiny counter, arguing about legal theory with Doc. Doc was our unit's medic. He was a quiet man with kind eyes who had stitched up my hand more times than I could count. He was currently trying to fit a massive tray of marinated beef into my small oven. Ramirez and Cho were there, too. They were rescue swimmers from my team. They were sitting on my floor, playing a video game on the TV, shouting insults at each other in good fun. "You cheat, Cho," Ramirez yelled. "That was a glitch." "Get better, Ramirez," Cho laughed. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, holding a drink. I watched them. These were the people who knew me. Princess knew how scared I was when I first filed the lawsuit. She was the one who answered the phone at 2 a.m. when I was crying because I missed the idea of a father. Doc knew my physical limits. He knew how to calm me down after a bad mission when my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ramirez and Cho knew that I would never leave them behind in the water. They trusted me with their lives, and I trusted them with mine. They didn't want my money. They didn't care about my house. They didn't ask for credit cards or designer bags. They just wanted to be here. They flew across the country to eat tacos in a small apartment because they loved me. "Hey, Aurora," Princess called out. "Stop spacing out and help me with the guacamole. I need a master chef." I smiled. Coming, I walked over and picked up a knife. We cooked together. We bumped elbows in the tiny kitchen. It was chaotic and messy and loud. We ate sitting on the floor and on the couch because I didn't have a dining table big enough. We told stories about boot camp. We made fun of our commander. We talked about the future. Nobody mentioned my father. Nobody mentioned Ivy. Their names didn't belong here. They were ghosts from a past life. Later that night, the snow stopped falling. The sky cleared. I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. Princess followed me. She handed me a mug of hot cocoa. "You okay?" she asked. I looked out at the frozen lake. It was dark and still. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm good. It's a lot better than last year, Princess said. It's a different world, I said. I thought about the word family. For 28 years, I thought family meant the people you shared DNA with. I thought it meant obligation. I thought it meant you had to let them hurt you because blood is thicker than water. That was a lie. A lie told by people who wanted to use you. The full quote is actually, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose are stronger than the bonds you are born into." My father and Ivy were my biology. But these people inside, laughing, eating, cleaning up the mess, they were my family. Loyalty is a choice. Presence is a choice. Love is a verb, it's something you do, not just something you say. My father chose money, I chose peace. I took a sip of the cocoa. It was sweet and warm. Inside, Cho let out a loud cheer as he finally beat Ramirez at the game. The whole room erupted in laughter. I turned my back on the cold, dark lake. I turned my back on the memories of the big house and the empty promises. I opened the sliding glass door and stepped back inside, into the warmth and the noise of the people who actually gave a damn. I was